you need to do when you first open the model is press reset. This will give you a city with 7 by 7 roads in a grid. Then we need to select the location, the origins from which passengers arrive. We'll just pick random location, meaning that the passengers will be distributed randomly on the grid. And then they would all want to go to the city center because presumably they all work in the city center. We'll choose about 400 passengers, and then we'll have 5 buses, each carrying 8 passengers. The first phase would be to change the preferences of the roads so that we can select a subset of the road that is suitable to delivering all the people to their destinations. This happens with the ants, and so we create an ant for each passenger, except for the ones that already are in the center and arrived. And then we let the ants move about. And we have this slider here that you can use to make it easier to see how the ants are changing the road. It doesn't affect the computation, it's just for making it clearer what's going on. Now once all the ants have arrived, we can go to the second phase where the bees are using the information created by the ants to actually come up with routes. And so we'll have a bee for each origin destination pair. In this case, because the origins are randomly distributed, we have an origin in every intersection, and so we'll have bees for each intersection, and all the bees are moving into the middle, into the center. Then in the third iteration, we assign, based on the routes that the bees have come up with, we assign buses to the routes. And now we can see what happens when the buses start moving. Now, there are 2 important plots here to the right. The first one here tells us the amount of passengers that on average each bus is carrying. We would like that to be as high as possible. And then we have this plot that tells us how many people are waiting to get to their destination. Now you can see that there's a correlation between the occupancy of the bus and the rate at which the passengers are delivered to their destinations. As long as the occupancy is reasonable, the rate would be good. When the occupancy drops, the rate would plateau. And you can see that's happening right now. That the movement of the buses no longer fits the distributions of passengers in the city. So what we can do is, instead of waiting for the buses to eventually pick up all the passengers, is to compute new routes based on the distribution of remaining passengers. So we can do that by going back to the first phase and assigning ants to the remaining passengers, and then calculating the new distribution, again assigning the bees, and then coming up with new routes for the buses. Now this really demonstrates the power of the approach, because we can monitor the bus occupancy levels, and each time they drop below some kind of critical threshold, we know that the bus schedule does not fit the distribution of passengers, and we can recalculate the routes and then give the buses their new routes, and the system will adapt to the new distribution of passengers. Another thing we can do is change the structure of the roads and see how the system can reroute the bus trails when the conditions change, when roads are blocked and areas of the city become disconnected. So we can do that by using this paint button. If we press on it and select the off-road color, we can now disconnect areas of the city and see what happens when we do that. So now let's assume that the passengers are all in the city center and they want to get to the four corners of the grid. Let's just do a little bit more damage here and here. I don't know, just we'll have to make the corners themselves accessible. But other than that, we are now ready, and let's see what happens. So okay, now the ants are going about their business, trying to find efficient routes to reach the four corners, and you can see that they are quite successful at finding good routes. Now let's take the bees and let them follow the routes, and then we'll take the buses, and you can see how they are delivering the passengers. So it's quite fun to play with this system, to change the layout of the road, to think of the way you can perhaps trap the ants to prevent them from finding the path to the destination, or being surprised in sometimes how dumb they can be and sometimes how clever they can be. But I hope this kind of gives the an overview of what you can do with this model and how you can play and understand how it works.